What do you want it to be hybrid there?
What do you want, what?
Be hybrid or at home? Medium.
Then again, we all look close, right? They might not.
When she calls me, I'm like, oh, I'll sign this right here.
Yes.
And sometimes I like it in person.
That's sometimes it's so easy just to walk in the office.
Happy birthday.
I have a pin.
It's true. I know. I know. I would tell my.
You ready technically, Vicky, or?
I'm getting the recording.
Out of time to
Good evening, I'll welcome everybody. Go ahead and call to order our regular meeting of the Hubbard City Planning Commission for April 15th, 2025. If you would first join me for pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Thank you, everybody, for showing up in person.
That was good. Since we didn't know we were doing this earlier today, so. Moving on the agenda, we have 2 sets of minutes. I would entertain a motion if you guys have all had a chance to look at those.
Yes. Motion to approve the minutes.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Next item up is time extension request for PUD 2022-01 Bear Creek subdivision, 11,985 Brody Creek Road Northeast, for the Frank Brodick Trust. Do you have a little bit of staff background on this?
Briefly, yes.
Okay, cool. So I'll turn it over to Holly.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Holly Byram, with the Midland Valley Council of Governments. I serve as your contract city planner. This first agenda item is a request for a 1-year time extension. And this was an application that received planning commission approval a couple of years ago. And included in your staff report is the notice of decision that went out, as well as the request from the applicant. This applies to the Bear Creek Planned Unit Development, and it was file number PUD 2022-01. The applicant is working with the city on this application. They have an expiration date to record their first phase of their plat. The expiration date is April 25, 2025, and they are requesting a 1-year time extension to April 25, 2026. So attached in Exhibit A, you'll see the letter from the applicant. They state that the delay that they've experienced has been mostly due to seeking the right developer for this project, especially in consideration of market rates. They've included their time request, and then I've also provided that notice of decision. I'm happy to answer any questions, but overall, your code and your notice of decision allow for this 1-year time extension. They requested it before the expiration date. There have been no substantive changes to the applicable code or to their plans yet. So staff is recommending approval.
Thank you, Holly. Any questions? I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Probably more of the logistical. When we make a decision like this, 'cause I've been around here a while,
This isn't really based on the merits of the first decision. It's just based on the criteria for an extension.
Yeah.
They've met those criteria, then.
Yep.
Our duty is to, not duty, but our decision is to just extend, not
Yeah.
look at the original merits of the application.
Exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I'm just trying to clarify in my own head, so.
Yeah, so that 1 year just gives them time to record their first phase.
Yeah.
And then the Oregon revised statutes gives them a full 10 years from their original decision to record the remaining phases.
Anybody else?
Now they need to drop their price, find the developer.
With that, this is an action item, so I would,
Steve K is online, he may wanna.
oh, sure, okay.
Wants to speak to this or not.
Hello, planning commissioners, can you hear me?
Yep.
Not much to add. It's mainly due to kind of bad timing with mortgage rates going sky high over the last couple of years. So the property owner, the applicant, is continuing to market this property and wants to find a developer, but it has to be a good fit. There's a lot of infrastructure improvements. It's a very large project, so it needs to be a big developer. And, they want to make sure that any developer would, that mortgage rates are in line with what people can afford. So mortgage rates look like they're going to continue to decline over this next year. So it does look favorable that, the project can move forward.
I've got a question for you, Steve.
Sure.
They built a shop and a house. Is that somehow going to be removed? Because I didn't see it in the original plan. How's that get incorporated into the original? Or is that in the second phase?
So there is an existing home and some outbuildings now. They've been there for some time. The plans are to remove them when the property is developed, but those structures are located in the northern portion of the site, and likely the development will happen first. The first phase will probably be the extreme southern portion of the site first, because that's where gravity sewer will be extended to first. So that area would likely be developed first, and so the home might be there, a while. It's possible.
I didn't know that. It was a brand new home, brand new shop, just literally just finished months ago.
I think that's outside the UGB,
Is
but
it?
Sean could.
Yeah,
probably.
so thank you, Chair. That new home and shop/garage area is actually is across the street from where that development's gonna happen. So the development happens further north from where that new house is built.
I thought it was part of the, so, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that property, that driveway will be the far southern edge of the development
Yes.
at this point.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I thought it was in the UDP, so,
Yeah.
or in the planned community.
Actually, it's not UGB, it's city limits now,
Yeah.
so that was
Yeah.
brought in, so sorry, my clarification. But any other questions for Steve? Do you have any other comments?
No other comments?
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
that. And I guess that leads us to discussion, if there's discussion, or if somebody wants to make a motion to approve the extension.
I move to approve the motion for a 1-year extension.
All second.
Have a motion, a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, next on our agenda is a public hearing for legislative amendment LA 2025-01 effective amendments for Hubbard Development Code. I'm assuming you want this read in, the script read in for.
I'll help you.
Good evening, my name is Glenn Holm. I am Chair of the Hubbard Planning Commission. I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place. If
for the public hearing in the matter of legislative amendment LA 2025-01, a package of amendments to the Hubbard Development Code in compliance with recent housing bills. This hearing is now open. It is 6:39 PM. Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of every public hearing. The city planner will review this material. Your patience is appreciated as she goes through these statements.
Thank you, sir. The applicable substantive criteria upon which this case will be decided are found in the Hubbard Development Code, the City of Hubbard Comprehensive Plan, and the Oregon statewide planning goals. The specific criteria are summarized in the staff report and will be reviewed at this hearing. All testimony and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward these approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy which you believe to apply to this case. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal shall be raised no later than the close of the record at the final evidentiary hearing on this case. Such issues shall be raised with and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this body and the parties to this hearing an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. The public hearing will proceed with the staff report and any comments from governmental agencies in attendance, followed by all of those who are in support of the code amendments. All those opposed to the code amendments will then be allowed to speak, followed by those with general comments who are neither for nor against. All speakers should try to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Please state your name clearly into the microphone and provide city staff your mailing address for the record before your comments. Please try to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed the same thoughts, it's perfectly all right to state that you agree with the statements of that previous speaker. Please be assured that everyone will have an opportunity to speak. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must be formally placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please submit the material to city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. With that out of the way, I need to ask the audience and fellow planning commissioners a few questions. Number one, are there any objections to the notice that was published? Number two, are there any declarations of bias by any member of this body? Number three, are there any declarations of conflict by any member of this body? Those out of the way, I would ask Holly to please give us a staff report.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this is legislative amendment file number LA 2025-01, our housing bills compliance. The Planning Commission and the City Council have held 2 joint work sessions on this topic. As the members are familiar this evening, Hubbard, due to its population size greater than 2,500, is subject to a couple of new state legislation, which is now in the revised statutes. And in order to comply with those, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments has received funding from the state to assist our member cities find compliance before the deadline here. So this evening, we are presenting a staff report of findings, and then attached to that staff report is it's a set of comments that we've received back from the state of Oregon. And then Exhibit B are the draft code amendments. So just briefly talking through the staff report in front of you this evening. The main section of that staff report has to do with the Oregon statewide planning goals. I'll just touch on a few. Goals 1 and 2 are our procedural goals that ensure that we have multiple opportunities for the public to engage and participate in this decision-making process, as well as the procedures that we use to arrive at a local decision. For this type 4 legislative amendment, we'll hold a hearing both in front of the Planning Commission and then also in the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision, and then that will be enacted by an ordinance. Other critical goals to this particular package, of course, goal 10 being the most important, and that's the housing goal. The purpose of these housing bills before us this evening are really to ensure that Oregon communities are facilitating the development of local housing for Oregon residents. And so there are measures included in tonight's track changes that reduce the lot sizes for some of your housing types. It allows duplexes on single family lots. It allows for middle housing land divisions. And so the intent of this entire package really is to facilitate local housing options. And in your comprehensive plan, you have the goal of providing a variety of housing choices for your local community. So that's the intent tonight. And at the end of the staff report are several options available to the Planning Commission. The recommended option this evening is to motion to recommend the City Council approve the package. Exhibit A starts on page 7 of the staff report, and those are the new comments that we've received back since we last discussed these legislative amendments. So these comments come from the Oregon Housing Accountability and Production Office by way of our DLCD regional representative. Just briefly to review the comments that they provided after reviewing the proposed changes. The first has to do with duplex parking. Specifically, OAR requires no more than 2 spaces for the duplex. That means 1 per unit, where previously they were required to have 2 per unit. Regarding ADU parking, ORS prohibits cities from requiring a parking space for ADUs now, and so you'll see that the wording in your ADU standards has changed from shall provide parking to may provide parking. The third bullet point from HAPO is clear and objective issues. So this has to do with any part of the code that requires discretion when it comes to the development of local housing. And so for this reason, the local standard about privacy windows in the upper stories of an ADU has been removed. And then access points for multifamily units has been refined to simply pointing to the access standards that are already adopted. And then you'll also see that procedurally, housing development is no longer subject to local hearings and public hearing procedures. Rather, site development reviews that have to do with housing are now required to be a staff level decision, which is a pretty big change to how most communities have done that in the past. When we receive applications or building permits for single family or duplexes, those are always a staff level decision. But in the past, anything more than that, so triplexes or apartment buildings, have always gone to the Planning Commission. Now those are being returned back to a staff level decision with an appeal going to the Planning Commission. So that's a little bit of a change for most communities as well. So those are the main points there provided in comments by the state. And then Exhibit A contains the proposed changes. In the past few months, when we've looked at these proposed changes to the Hubbard Development Code, we've used the same system of highlighting, but there have been staff comments inserted in text boxes throughout this document. Those text boxes with the references have been removed, but we're happy to talk through any of the proposed changes if we need to refresh our memory about why these are required to be changed. So I won't belabor the point. I know we've gone through this document and the proposed changes. Again, the changes that have occurred since the last time we spoke are primarily related to parking for duplexes, parking for ADUs, removing the privacy window requirement on upper floors of ADUs, and then the decision procedures for residential site development review. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but the majority of this text is the same as the last time we saw it. So let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, we can continue on and to hear if anyone else has questions, comments, concerns.
So the townhouses are just, we're basically looking around only 2 per lot.
Yes, for R1 and R2 zones, I believe. I believe still says that in the R3 zone, townhouses of 2 or more attached units are permitted.
And why would we want to take parking, to a smaller amount? Just for space, for people to either,
This is a really hard pill for a lot of small communities to swallow, especially when we don't have reliable public transportation. So what you'll see now, may not make a lot of sense because what is required is for a single family dwelling to require 2 parking spaces, a duplex total to have 2 parking spaces, and then a multifamily like apartment to have 2 parking spaces per unit. However, because of middle housing land divisions, the 2 townhouses or the duplex could be split into 2 townhouses, which would then result in 1 space per townhouse, if that makes any sense. So, we are doing our best to comply with what has been adopted by the state.
sounds like we don't have a choice.
Yeah. But beyond that.
Yeah. So a guy could put 2 spaces in if he had a duplex, he could put 4 spaces, in his, on his project.
Absolutely, yeah, these are minimums, so a property owner could certainly put in more. The only limitation, of course, would be the width of the driveway that's allowed. And lot coverage.
Any other questions for staff?
I remember 2 meetings ago, there was discussion on the single room occupancy.
Yeah.
Were there any additional changes? I wasn't able to make it the last
Oh,
meeting. I know there was
okay.
discussion on it.
Yeah, there was only a small revision, and that was that the way it was worded was that the rooms were oriented around a central kitchen. But really, it didn't make sense to have that type of a restriction, because as long as they're in the same structure, they could potentially be on separate floors, for example, so that was unnecessary language in there, but the point is that they have shared facilities, regardless of how they're oriented.
And do we have single room occupancy within the city right now?
I know historically, this building over here was. I think Mr. Saucedo's building, I believe historically was.
There are some.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding parking, are the streets gonna be wide enough where there's on-street parking for any kind of overflow?
Yeah,
Because of the restricted amount of minimum parking in front of the units.
yeah. The way that your streets are developed are guided by the transportation system plan, or the TSP. Based upon the classification of the street, that determines the width of the road, how wide the lanes are, and whether or not there's parking on both sides or bike lanes, and then how wide the sidewalk is. But I believe all of your local streets and up have parking on both sides, unless there's a special development design approved specifically by the planning commission and the city engineer. Yeah. So an example of that, in the PUD we were just discussing, I believe there are some private streets in that they don't meet the local street classification because they provide parking elsewhere. So some of the streets are functioning more like an alley in that development. But again, it was through a special discretionary process through the planned unit development approval. Yeah. Mhm.
If nothing else to say, and you can say whatever you want.
Is there any other city departments who wanted to weigh in on this? I don't know who's online, but. Or do you have anything, Sean?
I don't, sir.
Chief Carlin's on.
I don't have anything to add.
My colleague, Carmichael is online. I don't know if she had any comments to add as well.
Hi, everyone. No, I don't. I just appreciate you all being available to the conversation and thinking about your community. These state requirements are hard to have to work through and still find a way in your code. So I appreciate the work Holly's done with you all and your efforts to have joint sessions and talk about it.
So move along then. With no other questions, I will now go ahead and accept public testimony regarding the amendments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support of the amendments? Nobody's hand raised on Zoom. Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition to the amendments? Is there anybody who would like to speak neither for nor against the amendments? And seeing as there's no comment on this, do you have anything you want to add, Nick, Holly? Okay. Before I close or continue the public hearing, are there any additional questions from planning commissioners, staff, or anyone? Once I close the hearing, only commissioners or staff can speak. Public testimony is now over. I will close the public hearing at 6:55 p.m. And I will now entertain discussions on amendments and or a motion. Don't everybody jump at once.
I read the whole thing. I really don't have anything to add or argue against.
We don't want to do that. We're tight.
I hear what you're saying.
We don't have a choice.
No, but it's good for staff to hear kind of that internal conversation if, there was some reservations, I think. Because it kind of gives you a feel as to where we're going. And we're not actually, we're just providing a recommendation to city council. So our decision really isn't binding, but it is a recommendation that if we wanted to see some, certain revisions, that language could be included if you want, so.
There's more people, less houses, so I mean, for that purpose also, one of these days, somebody might build a duplex in do or townhouse and live in one because of the space and so on. And it's hard, knowing that the city is usually a two parking garage or two parking area, and you live here every day, it looks great. Still feels like it's 1990. I was gonna say 90, but I was born in 72, so. But we don't have choice. I mean, it's the way of the future.
I'll see what's going on with this emergency law that they put in.
I wouldn't be the one to ask, but Holly would.
McCray may have a finger on the pulse of any challenges.
Sorry, did you say challenges?
Well,
Yeah,
McCray,
she asked back, are there any legal challenges? Are you wanting to know if there's any legal challenges?
I know Eugene had.
Did you want to comment on that, McRae?
I'd offer that the only place that I wouldn't really call it a challenge, but within Senate Bill 1537, and we talked about this last month when Holly and I were there with the work session with Sean, was the exemptions to the adjustments. And we are seeing statewide those coming about, typically for larger cities, but Sean had asked Holly and I to bring back information for you all to look at doing the exemption to the adjustments. And that, you ultimately, because there's all these new criteria that a developer could come in and just say, we meet the criteria, we don't have to provide parking or do other things. There's just a list, and we can provide you more detail at your next planning commission meeting. But Sean had asked for Hubbard and potentially our other small towns who these really are just we're not interested if we could meet the criteria for the exemption to the adjustments. I feel like I'm saying lots of opposing words, but essentially a provision that you wouldn't have to go by that adjustment. And Independence has submitted for the exemption. They haven't, decision hasn't been rendered. So it's not, it's a vehicle within the rule to exercise. So I wouldn't call it like legal opposition, because the state set up a way that if you have an adjustment process in place, that people are able to get adjustments in the city, which they are, that you can request an exemption. So questions? That was a lot of words.
Based on what criteria are the exemptions being asked for?
There is no criteria. Essentially, like if you want, like let me pull up.
It's not necessarily we're asking for an exemption for reasons A, B, and C. It's just.
Yeah, no, if you are within these categories in the Senate bill, you're a developer and you own property, you can just come in and you're essentially like just given approval. That's what Senate Bill 1537 allows with this adjustment process. So I think Hubbard and other communities would be good candidates for the exemptions, because you can still exercise. Like, you all have been very flexible. Holly and I talked a little bit about the adjustments you have given, which are typically 20% on a variance, right? Like on a setback of 5 feet, you allow an adjustment of 1 foot, or, just different standards. And this is just saying you don't even have to come in with an application. You're just granted it. 1537. So we'll come back next month with, it's section 37 of Senate Bill 1537, section 37. And it has just several, so local government shall grant an adjustment, side or rear setbacks of 10%, individual development projects, common area, of not more than 25%. You can, it can just reduce parking minimums. So you all have a parking minimum, but someone could come in and say, oh, I'm using Senate Bill 1537. I don't want to provide any parking, and you're subject to it. So, and that was the one that some of you raised, like, wait a sec, parking is a big deal in Hubbard. Like, we don't want to like lose the parking your parking standards are appropriate. You think they work for your city. You don't want to like give away any of your parking requirements. So, but other than that, I haven't heard of like legal objections to House Bill 3395 or 2001, these different missing middle, or not missing middle, but middle housing requirements, just that are allowing and permitting more options in density. I haven't heard any legal objections to that. So with that, we'll come back with the exemption request, and maybe we'll even know something about Independence and how they fared by next month. But I actually just had an email come through from DLCD on the city of Salem's request for the exemption. Like, they don't want it. And not that, but just to tell you that like cities are like, we have an adjustment process. We don't want the state telling us carte blanche that nope, people don't have to do parking or these other things. Like, let us have some of our local control here. So.
Thank you. Holly, you have another point.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure we were clear that there are no exception provisions in this current package. And that reason for that is that those are scheduled to sunset. And so the recommendation is that local cities don't adopt the exception language in here. So what that means is that we can continue to go through that exemption process, and it would have no bearing on this package in front of you today. So this can move forward, and then we can work on that separately. Those exceptions are not in this language.
Is there a timeline on the exemptions?
I don't know that, how long it would take.
We have a deadline until June, I think. Is that right?
Right, but that language wouldn't be in here anyway, so this can move forward without it. Yeah. My understanding is that the exception procedure looks at, I believe, the city's track history of granting these small variances, and I don't know if I've seen a variance denied at the city of Hubbard. You know, most of the time they're small and they're reasonable and there are exceptional circumstances, so.
I know West Side Drywall wanted quite a bit and they didn't get a lot of it, so that was one that was not. They basically followed what
That was a hard service parking.
the hard surface parking. And there was something else with the water, I forget now. No, that was brought up after, yeah, but most people are reasonable, they ask for something that makes sense. So, but anyway. They're not asked, 10% is not crazy, right?
Right.
So it's every 10 feet is a foot. And not crazy. So I move motion to approve and see what happens. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. So your motion is to approve
Approve
the
the
recommendation.
recommendation.
Okay.
Because they're not crazy, and then we have an option to opt out.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. And I assume we'll deliver that recommendation via.
Here you go, eh?
Thank you, folks. We'll take it to council.
Let the mayor know there was a lot of grunting up here.
Will do.
All right, seeing no other business on our agenda, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Not a discussion item. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Current meeting at 7:05 PM. Thanks, everybody.